What are 3 things you want to work on?
What do I want to work on? I've my confidence, my stance, and eye contact.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so this is my story. I'll be talking about how my parents met and the day I was born, and how and shortly after that. So it all started in a small town in Mexico in Christmas of 1986, when my parents were just 13 years old, and they had actually both recently broken up with their respective partners. Yeah, at 13, and. And so they were both pretty obviously upset, and they wanted to go to this party to try to, calm down, unwind. And so my mom was just hanging out with her friends, and then all of a sudden here's my dad, thinking all sad about his ex-girlfriend. But then he sees this pretty girl and immediately falls for her, and so he asks her out to dance, and she agrees. They dance a couple songs, and they hit it off and agreed to see each other later. So 3 days after they met, he asked her if she wanted to be his girlfriend, and she thought about it, and she initially said no, but shortly after she said yes. And so they dated for 2 years, and then when my dad was 15, he decided to move over here to the U.S. and left my mom, and so they maintained a long-distance relationship for several years. And so while my dad was here, he worked as a window washer, and one day he fell off the building. Luckily, the harness saved his life, but unfortunately it also injured his back. So he sued the company for it. He got compensated, got a lot of money for it, and he used that money to go to school and get a degree in, I believe, is computer science. Like, to this day, I still cannot explain what it is he does, but it provides for the family. So he went to school, worked, and then he went back to Mexico, reunited with my mom after so many years, knocked her up, and they got married. And so the day of my birth was actually, they went to, it was my aunt's birthday party. It was April 14th, 1988, and my dad had a bit to drink. My mom obviously couldn't drink, but she ate a lot and felt tired, so she said to my dad, "Okay, let's go home. I don't feel so good." And so it was already past midnight, so it was already 15. And so they went to bed and tried to go to sleep, but by that point my mom was already having contractions, and she complained that her stomach was hurting, and they didn't think much of it because it wasn't time for me to be born yet, so they didn't think, the baby's coming. My dad just said, "Oh, it's probably something you just ate at the party, no big deal." And so she tried to go back to sleep, but again, she complained that her stomach was hurting, and she said, "Something's wrong, something's not right here." And my dad said, "Well, it can't be the baby, it's too early, it's not time yet." And so he said, "Okay then, if this continues, we'll go to the hospital." But so she went back to sleep. She slept for a while, and she woke up and realized she was bleeding. And that's when she got scared, and she's like, "Okay, we gotta go." And so they went to the hospital, and my parents tried to talk to the doctors to see if they could postpone the birth, but by that point it was too late. Like, I was already going to be born. And so I forgot how long the labor was, but it was pretty painful, my mom said. In fact, so painful that she kind of peed herself, and she didn't notice she had a little accident until after I was born, and the nurse said, "Hey, ma'am, do you want me to kind of clean you up? You kind of made a little mess back there." But I mean, at last I was born. Unfortunately, though, something was wrong, because one thing, I was born prematurely. I was born at around 7.5 months, so I was having trouble breathing, and they put me in an incubator, and I stayed in the hospital for about a month after I was born. And my parents had to keep visiting me, and the doctors up in Mexico, they didn't know what was wrong with me. I don't know if it was the technology at the time or just the state, but they couldn't tell what was wrong with me. Just that they had to feed me through a tube up my nose. My mom said it was painful for her to watch me like that. And that's when my dad said, we should move over to the United States. You know, I have a brother who lives there, and they could probably tell us what's wrong with me, what his condition is. So we moved over here to Orange County, and we went to the doctors, and that's when they diagnosed me with cerebral palsy. And when I was originally born, the doctors had said that I wouldn't be able to walk or talk or do anything on my own, but the doctors over here, they said, no, like, it's not a major setback, you should be fine. And as you can tell, it's true, because I'm right here standing and telling you the story, but after that, you know, things were so. I mean, my parents weren't, they were still trying to get used to living in a new country, and my mom was kind of learning to take care of a child who had special needs. Sometimes when she would try to feed me, I wouldn't swallow, and sometimes my dad would come home from work to find my mom crying and me kind of suffocating because I just couldn't breathe. But over time, they took me to physical therapy and stuff like that, and my whole life I've been going there, and things have seemed to have gone up, you know, for the better for the most part. And so, one thing I do remember, though, is one of the first things I remember having as a gift was this blue blanket that my parents bought for me shortly after I was born. I have a lot of memories of that blanket. I often remember my dad wrapping me around it and pretending I was a taco and trying to eat me. And to this day, it's so special because they bought it shortly after I was born, and to them and to me, it's sort of a symbol of hope, because I kind of beat the odds of given my situation. I still use it to go to sleep to this day. I mean, it was pretty cold the last few days, so I wore my baby blanket to sleep. I'm not ashamed of it, but so to wrap up, I spoke about how my parents met and how they came to this country. Plus, of course, how I was born, the complications surrounding it, and my life today. So, thank you.